Welcome to Vote 2017. I'm your host, Teresa Whipple, and today we are here with Deborah Kilgore, who is running for Edmonds School District Board of Directors, District 4. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You bet. We're going to talk about a variety of issues related to the school district, but let's start with a simple question. Tell us more about yourself and why you're running.
Okay. Well, I'm a parent, and I have 3 kids in the Edmonds School District, 2 in high school and 1 in elementary school. I'm also a longtime parent volunteer. I've volunteered in my school for about 8 or 9 years now. 3 of those years I was PTO president. And I volunteered across the community. But also, I'm involved in education. I've been an educator, a college professor of education, and more recently and currently, I'm a research scientist at University of Washington, and I study engineering education.
Okay. Wow. Well, given that background, what are some of your top priorities if you're elected that you're going to focus on?
Well, given that wide-ranging background and sort of my commitment to the schools and my commitment to education, I think that it made a lot of sense to run for this position when it came open. And I would say that my priorities have they started out a certain way. And honestly, they haven't changed a lot since, even though I've learned quite a bit on the campaign trail. But the thing that I was most concerned about was, as a parent volunteer in one of the schools in District 4 that is not as well off and is quite diverse, I was seeing that sort of policy, when it trickles down to us, was affecting us kind of potentially inequitably at times. Okay. For instance, we all know about how when the budget is tight and then the parent groups or the teachers themselves have to buy crayons or paper. We've all heard that, and it is true that it's happened. And at a school like ours and some of the other schools in the district, it's much more difficult for us to raise those funds than at a school that doesn't have some of the economic challenges that we have.
Yeah.
So that was my initial reason for running, because I felt like I had a very on-the-ground kind of understanding, as well as a high-level understanding as a scholar and as a policy analyst. And it's evolved more as I've learned more, but it's still kind of basic. It's making sure that every child in the district has a fair shot.
Okay. And you mentioned the diversity issue, which I think is one that everybody is very aware of, that the Edmonds School District has become increasingly diverse in the last few years. Used to be white majority and is now no longer, right? And what kinds of things, and I will say this in the context of Madrona School last year in Edmonds had an issue where they had some swastikas painted on the building and some racial slurs, and it really upset people, understandably. And I think that it kind of shone a spotlight on this is an issue that is important to people and needs to be addressed. What kinds of things would you think, as a director, you would be looking at coming into the district on the diversity issue? What would be your priorities there?
Okay, well, I think you're talking about a couple of different things. First of all, we're talking about the challenges of a very diverse student body.
Yes.
And this rapid change that we've experienced. We've experienced kids from all over the world coming to our schools, and we have more poverty. We've seen more poverty as people move out from Seattle who can no longer afford to live in Seattle. We've seen some other challenges, and it's happened pretty fast, So it's challenging just to meet that change, to understand that we're going through that change, and so I think that the district is taking a shot at it, and they're actually doing some interesting and good things. I mean, some of your sort of more fundamental things that the state has done and that the district has done. For instance, getting us all-day kindergarten for every kid. That is a huge improvement. It's more than simply responding or responding to a swastika. I mean, that will give
Yeah.
all of our kids a really good opportunity to get the early learning that they need. Although we still have problems with access to internet, but another example is getting all the kids the chance to have a laptop. That is a huge deal, and our technology levy certainly was a commitment to that diversity. So those are things that are they're material kinds of things that you can do to kind of equal or even up the playing field for kids. But responding to hate, I mean, certainly we've all been very concerned about it, and parents are concerned, teachers are concerned, and of course kids are concerned. When we first had the fear that people would be thrown out of the country, my child came home upset because some of his friends might very well not be there the next day. He was afraid. So we are afraid. I think some of this backlash or some of these hate crimes have to do with kind of a response to our increasing diversity. As a director, now getting to what I would like to do
Yeah.
as a director, well, first of all, our diversity in our schools is a wonderful opportunity, and I strongly believe that. As much as I might talk about the challenges that we faced with, difficult budget circumstances over the years, and I was, a heavy volunteer when we were in the middle of the recession, and so I know as bad as it can get. But at the same time, the things that we were doing in that diverse school were wonderful, and our kids were learning increased. They were gaining skills in conflict resolution, getting more comfortable with diversity, comfortable with thinking empathetically about other people, and with critical thinking, solving problems with diverse perspectives. In many ways, they're developing skills that when I went to school, we didn't develop those kinds of skills. We had to learn them much later on.
Yes.
And some of us haven't, and that's possibly why some of us are engaged in some of these terrible activities. But our kids, I see a real hope there, and so that is something that I would certainly like to pursue more. To pursue more of what are what's the value of this diversity and these wonderful different perspectives.
Okay. Let's talk about another issue that got a lot of attention in the last year or so in the school district and also in some of the cities that are in the school district boundaries, and that is the topic of crumb rubber infill on playfields. There were a group of parents who were and neighbors who were worried about this issue and raised it. It happened in the city of Edmonds initially, but the school district and the school board took a look at it. The concerns were health and environmental safety related with the infill itself, which is made of ground-up tires. But the question was, whether it posed a safety risk, and the board looked at it and decided that they would move forward with the traditional infill, even though there were other alternatives parents were proposing. Now there's nothing immediately on the horizon for that, but it's likely to come back to the board again when you're on the board. City of Edmonds actually has a temporary ban on anything crumb rubber related in their boundaries, so it could come up that way too. What is your position at this point on the issue? Have you had a chance to even look at it or study it? What are you thinking about it?
Yes, I don't think you can be a candidate in any of our races without having looked at this issue. So let me talk about this issue for a minute. First of all, when this issue came up with a group of community members who were concerned, as you said, I took it very seriously. And I went and I looked at the research myself. I didn't look at every single research study, but I did look at several of them. And I looked at the EPA. They did a lit review, a literature review, and sort of an overview of what we've studied and what we haven't studied. And And I also talked to other community members. And one thing, because I take the role as representative very seriously, that I want to understand where my constituents are coming from, potential constituents.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to also remember that thousands of kids play youth sports in our district, thousands. And I spoke with some of their parents and some of our leaders in youth sports, our volunteer leaders. And there was also a concern about getting the fields that we need. As we know that Pacific Northwest, it's difficult to have year-round sports without having some kind of, inside locations, or artificial turf really helps us to have year-round sports. And so I listened to a lot of people, and I looked at the research myself, and frankly, I concluded that I was not compelled to pull my own children off the fields. I have 3 kids in sports, and I still send them out to these fields. And the reason is because the science very clearly says, so far, that there is no risk. There is no increased risk. And I understand that the science hasn't studied everything.
Right.
I understand that.
There's still some studies underway, my understanding.
Right. There's,
Yeah.
in particular, 2 that I can think of that are big. One in California, and of course the EPA is doing a nationwide study. These studies could take years. They really are still kind of in the early stages. But I want to point to the studies that have already been done. Almost 100 studies, and there has been no finding that there was elevated risk either for individuals or for the environment. And so the thing is, when you're a policymaker, I feel that you have to take what you know, a combination of science, common sense, and the will of the people. And the science is pretty clear right now, and I understand that some people, because there are gaps, and I agree that there are gaps, but in anything there are gaps. That's the way science goes. That's the process of doing scientific research, which I do myself.
Yeah.
That you look for those gaps and you try to fill them, and that's the process of creating knowledge. But as, it's pretty compelling to me right now that these fields are pretty safe. So that's the science for me.
Okay.
The will of the people. I mean, yes, we do have a group of people who are very concerned about this, who are very worried, but we also have a very large group of people who want these fields. So I felt like their voices needed to be represented as well. And then common sense, and sort of what's going on now. So yes, I agreed with the decision among the school board and Linwood City Council and Edmonds City Council, to do the Meadowdale playfields, to do the crumb rubber in those playfields. Next year, when we're faced with another project, if we are, things may have changed, and I'm not set in my ways. I mean, again, I am a scientist, and I understand how science works, and I understand that things change. So next year, I'm going to look at it again, and I'm going to look at costs and benefits, and the will of the people, and science, the state of the science, and I'm going to make decisions that way.
Okay.
So.
Very good. All right. Well, let's talk about something that I think nobody has not heard about, and that is financing of schools. The Kllgore decision, which the legislature's been struggling with for the last several years, to try to find a way to meet the constitutional mandate of funding basic education, and they did come up with something that they thought would meet the mandate. Nobody knows whether the Supreme Court will agree that they did it, but now school districts are coming back, school boards are taking a look at the budget, based on what the legislature did. I know that, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of districts I've spoken with kind of are still looking at the numbers to see if it's helped enough to help with the fully funding issue. But as a board member, kind of how are you seeing that unfold? What will that look like in terms of the financing piece when you get on the board if you're elected?
It's going to be interesting. And by interesting, I mean complex and complicated and frustrating, and there may be some unknowns. What we see from the state, what I understand from the state budget, is that we have come part of the way there, that they are going to put more into teachers' salaries and into the support staff that we need to help remove those barriers to learning. So there is some relief coming our way. Whether it's enough, I don't know. The other side of it is that our local levies, which we've been very fortunate. Our community does value public education, and our community has passed local levies year after year. But the state is going to limit the amount that we're going to be able to collect. They're going to be more interested in what we collected for. We're not going to be able to contribute to basic education anymore. It's going to have to be focused on our extracurriculars and enrichment and other things like that. And honestly, in theory, that's the right way to go. I mean, that's sort of the fundamental issue behind McCleary is getting our state funded equitably across the state so that a poorer district will still have basic education versus a better off district like ours, at least with our taxpayers. You know, we won't have exceptional advantages. But if they don't fully fund our basic education, then we're going to be in a bind if we can't collect the difference. I think that part of the job of school board director is also going to be lobbying down in Olympia, making sure that our district's interests are held, kept in mind. That'll be part of it. And the other part, at least here at the local level, I'm pretty strongly in favor of putting funds in the classrooms and in the schools where they belong, and as much as we can, and putting them towards things that give us the biggest return on our investment. And those are things like class sizes and class sizes and teacher workload. Those are the things that get us the biggest return, just like all-day kindergarten, like those one-to-one laptops. I mean, these are big things, and they make a big difference.
Yeah, well, you'll have your work cut out for you for sure. Yeah. Well, and on that note, let's have this be your opportunity to directly address the voters and tell them why they should vote for you. So I'm giving you an opportunity to do that right now.
Okay, well, again, I'm Deborah Kilgore, and I'm running for Edmonds School Board Director, District 4, and I am asking for your vote today. I'm a longtime parent volunteer. I've got 3 kids currently going to school in the district. I'm a strong and passionate advocate for public schools, and that's why I'm running for this position. I think I'll do as good a job as can be done, given my background, given my understanding of policy and how it's made and how it affects our kids and our schools. And I'm committed to working hard for every child in every school. And so if you'd like to know more about me, you can always visit my website, www.deborahkilgore.com. And thank you very much.
Deborah Kilgore, thank you so much for coming in today, and I wish you the best of luck in November.
Thank you.